All right, today we're going to be talking about Sailing to Sarantium by Guy Gavriel Kay. So these are some books. I've read his other one, the most famous of his, Tigana, and I've really enjoyed that one. So I wanted to get more into his stories, and this is one I absolutely love. This book. This is a duology. So there's a second book in here called The Lord of Emperors that follows it, and this is very much a historical fantasy novel from here at this point. And so what I wanted to talk about in this one is that there is a fantastic and absolutely amazing main character in this one. I absolutely fell in love with him. He's incredibly smart. Like he's so cool and charismatic. And it makes me want to watch and see what happens next. You know, it makes me want to go on through the book and all the way from here. And I just wanted to talk about the scene. There's one scene in particular that really sold me and, you know, kind of hooked me in from here. It's fairly deep into the book. It's not like in the first 10 pages. I think it's like 80 to 100 pages or something like that from there. But it really just pulled me in from here. And I wanted to talk about that, kind of what made it so good and how he crafted it from here. Our main character, we don't initially meet him. And this has honestly been kind of one of the tricky parts, if it will, with both of Kay's books, is that Tigana follows this as well as Sailing to Sarantium, where they have this, the first, I don't know, it's like 20 to 30 pages even. I think it's less for Tigana from here. Oops, let me switch those. From here. And what it usually does with these initial aspects is he's doing a lot of historical background from here. He's doing a lot of setup, because if you read much of Kay's works, you'll understand he's very much a history guy. He's very much, he takes a section of history, you know, of real history, and basically just injects some fantasy in there and moves his characters around where he wants, and bam, that's what you get. That's where you get one of his novels. So the beginning part is all set up. And so what we have is we have the Sarantine empire going on, and the emperor dies with no heir, which is always really smart, and, you know, all great things happen from there. A young man, Petrus, ends up working with his uncle, and they end up making a play for power. And what they do is there's another fellow named Flavius Delinus, who they kind of frame him as making a play for fire or for power, and then they kill him. And then this one eliminates the rival. You're taking out a rival from here. And the other thing they do is they make it seem like this gross overstepping of power. You know, this man was greedy. He wore purple on the way to go crown himself. You know, what a guy from there. And what this does then is it allows the uncle to graciously take power. And from there, and it's really, you can kind of see that Petrus is really kind of driving a lot of this political intrigue and backfighting, and this really sets the stage, because this is a lot of heady backbiting, heady fighting, you know, intrigue that's going on with everything from here. And this is what the novel is kind of preparing us for at this point. Then we kind of skip forward 15 years or so. The uncle's dead. Petrus becomes Valerius II. The uncle, of course, was Valerius I. And he marries his mistress, making her the empress and him the emperor. And it's this big, you know, scandal, but he's the emperor, so who cares? And part of this, with this, he kind of orders the construction of a giant temple to Jod, which is really funny because I listened to this on audiobook and I would not have pronounced it Jod, but it's pronounced like that, or it's spelled like that, from Jod, a giant temple. And he's needing artisans and architects and all this stuff, and everybody, all people of all sizes, to build this great project. You know, he's going to build the greatest ever temple from here. And then a message is sent out to a little old place named Verona, which is playing the part of Rome. You know, Sarantium is Byzantine Empire from here for the historical aspect of it, that where it comes into play. And so this is where it goes. And this, you know, a courier, and he's a complete sleazebag, and he's really obnoxious. And it's one of those things where at this point it was really hard for me to get into it, because I didn't have a main character that really pulled me in. You know, we don't Petrus could have been it, but we don't really see him, and then it skips, and then most of this whole thing, you get a lot of the story is told from the point of view of a rando, this random peasant who's either a blue or green, one of the various factions of charioteers. He's just a fan. And I remember listening to this guy think, talking about, he's betting all of his money on the races and everything like that. And I remember thinking, dear God, please no main character for this guy. I can't deal with it. I don't think I can do it if this guy is it. And luckily, it turns out he's not. And then we switch again. And so I'm like, okay, I'm still kind of searching in the back of my mind. Where's this main character? We have a courier who's going along, who's, the sleazebag from here. And the courier finally delivers a note to a Mr. Martinian. And Martinian plays coy and points at this other guy and says he's Martinian, and this is actually his younger partner, and they are mosaicists, so they do mosaics. Caius Crispus, but everybody calls him Crispin. That he's the man, and he delivers a summons saying, you've been summoned by the Emperor Valerius II, once known as Petrus, 15 years ago, to work on his giant dome, do some mosaic work on this giant dome that we have constructed here to be the greatest temple of all time at this point. And from here, and this is where we really get introduced to Caius Crispin. And this is where this hit me, and I was like, oh, thank God, we finally have a good main character here. And so, what are these attributes that's going on? One thing that I actually really liked about him is he's older. He's not the 20-something, shepherd who's, mysterious father, who chosen one, sword, something, dragon, princess, save the kingdom. This is the cookie cutter. These are the ingredients for, the cookie cutter fantasy novel, where it outspits all the typical ones you'd expect. This is your Aragons. From what I understand, this is kind of the sort of Shannara. This is I think Chronicles of Amber, although I haven't read those, so I think that kind of fits it. There's another one that I'm trying to think of, Luke Skywalker. This is the cliche from here. Aragon's the main one because this is one I've read. I haven't read a lot of the older fantasy at that point. Wheel of Time kind of starts off like that, but it has it voids a lot of it by having a giant cast of characters coming into play where they're the ones kind of bringing along. So it's not just the rando guy, it's a rando crew at this point. It's not just the chosen one. So what do we have with Caius Crispin? So what we have is he's an older guy. He's a widower. His wife and 2 children, 2 daughters, died in the plague last year, and he is angry. He's angry at life. He's angry at himself. He couldn't save them. He couldn't do anything like that, and he wishes he had died with them. It's one of those where it's like, I really wish I hadn't actually lived, because now I have to live with the memory of my dead family, and I was absolutely helpless from here. And this is an interesting aspect that kind of comes into play, is that audiences like characters who've been through it. This is where you get your audiences like orphans. This is your Harry Potter. He's, by all accounts, should have come out a absolutely bad person. He should have been a bad person. Like, he came out an amazing person given the circumstances. He's abused, he's neglected. He honestly, what should have probably happened is Voldemort says, let's kill all, muggles. And Harry Potter says, sign me up from here, because he's like, this is his main interaction with muggles. Everyone is seemingly terrible. Nobody's looking, this is the psychopath serial killer, sort of recipe that all the movies want to show you. This is how you come up with one, is you put them in a home like Dursleys from here. But it's kind of told from kind of an, they're terrible, but that's just how they are. It's kind of like a just, jolly sort of deal. Another example is Huck Finn, where Huck Finn, his father is physically abusive. He tries to beat him on the regular. He drinks all the money away and then beats him. And so they have no money, and there's nobody else looking out for him. It's just a recipe for disaster, to the point where Huck Finn, fakes his death, with, I think, hog's blood, I want to say, to the point where once everyone finds out about it, everyone's just like, yep, he killed him. He killed his son. That's a shame, from there. But we knew it was going to happen at this point. And Huck Finn is an absolutely beautiful, young, naive, very, he's kind of the moral, he kind of represents this innocent moral compass for America. He kind of almost plays this little, naive morality as he's going through all these different adventures. He kind of plays this idea of this moral outlook representing America at this point, of what America could and should be in this regard, with everything where it comes into play. And it's this amazing thing. He's an amazing person, and we like him. We like him a lot because he's been through the ringer. He's been through this. Because as always, we identify with the struggle. You don't like characters who have it all. We hate them, in fact. Usually the easiest way to make an antagonist hateable is, they're attractive, they're smart, and rich. This is what it is. This is what it is. The bully in school will usually be one of these things. And this is why, the hot girl, who the main character has a crush on, who's the romantic interest, she's with this guy for all those reasons, because he's hot, attractive, and rich, the trifecta from there. And so what we've got now is we've got a main character who's been through all this, so we immediately like him. This is kind of how you introduce a main character and build him up. So this is the only downside with this story that really comes into play, is it took a while to get here. It took us a while to get to this point. This is why so far I really just kind of had to force myself to listen, because I listened to these, all three of these books so far on audiobook, Sailing to Sarantium, Lore of Emperors, and Tigana. I've listened to audiobook and they've been amazing from there. And so you really enjoy the fact that you finally get there. I don't know how you'd solve this, but this is just an aspect. So if you ever do read his books and you're like, man, this is an absolute slog, keep going. It does get better. Trust me. Because I've read two of them, and I remember reading Sailing to Sarantium, and it was like, there's no way he's going to salvage this. And lo and behold, he does. And so after a lot of cajoling and pushing and everything like that, from his mother, the queen, Martinian, Caius Crispin, eventually sets off. There's a whole episode, which I'm not really going to cover because it doesn't really come up with the queen of the Antai, his region, where she has a mission for him, and that kind of helps push him to go, because he doesn't want to go, because he doesn't care. This is a cool aspect about the characters, because he doesn't really, there's not a whole lot of at stake, because he doesn't really want to live. So it's not like this tense, thriller where the mother of 30 children has to make it home, and if she doesn't, they'll all die. That's a different level of tension that you're creating if you have something like that. And so after a bunch of cajoling, he eventually sets off. He can't actually sail to Sarantium because it's too late in the year, because the sleazy courier, delayed and took forever to come up here from there. And so he ends up setting off on foot. He hires a bodyguard to kind of travel the road with him, named Vargos. And at Martinian, who is he's much older than him, but that's his business partner. One time, I think, mentor and teacher, but then becomes his business partner for the mosaic business that they're in. He hires Vargos, but at Martinian's insistence, he goes and hangs out and checks out this guy named Zodicus, a place where he used to go, went once as a kid and got really freaked out because there's some strange occurrences. Turns out Zodicus is an alchemist, and this is kind of where we see there's not a whole lot of the fantasy element so far on this, but it's kind of there all along, and it does actually play like a pretty important background role for a lot of the characters, but it's very much a mild, sort of subtle is probably better than mild from there. He's an alchemist, and he kind of does this thing where he ties people's souls of some sort, to these little mechanical birds from here, and they're like these really, really roughshod mechanical looking things, kind of like string, and almost like a little bit steampunk quite, but they're kind of just a little bitty ornaments almost from here. They're nothing special about them or anything like that, but they can actually talk, and they talk in your mind, and they can speak. So he gives them one named Lenon, who can talk directly into Crispin's mind. And he's like, the reason why, one, this is a great gift, but two, he said, the Leanon will help you, keep a watch out. She'll be able to help you out, tell you, advise you. She's traveled the roads and help keep you alive from here. So he ends up taking her, and they go along, and she's kind of, it's interesting because from a story point of view, this gives you a very good, dialogue between characters where you can have a lot of talking going on because, Leanon can be talking to Crispin in his mind, and they argue, and she kind of plays a very adversarial role. She's very much goading and biting and very, very harsh from here. And so this is kind of helps keeps it lively while we're on the road because, as always, the story has to keep being interesting. You kind of have to keep the audience interested. So now we've been sold on this main character, and so now we need to see, what's he going to do? What does he do? What is he actually capable of? Because so far, while we do like him and he's smart and he's got street smarts, all this other thing, we haven't actually seen him really do anything. We haven't even seen him do any mosaic art, from here. So we're just kind of on the assumption he talks a good talk, and we're assuming because he carries himself well, he's a smart guy at this point. And so we want to see kind of what he'll do. So him and Vargo's heading out with Leanon, and they kind of stop at some inns, and they're kind of sketchy and all this stuff. And eventually they come to the inn in question where kind of this whole scene ends up playing out. And so they're going through this place named Saradia. And this is a kind of a poor peasant backwoods sort of place, and there is a lot of paganism here, and this is old school paganism with sacrifice, and it's illegal because the Guy Gavriel Kay's version of Christianity and God has taken over, so being a pagan is illegal and everything like that, but you still have a lot of people that still follow the old ways from here. And we kind of join from this other perspective and he does this thing where he'll, Crispin's headed this way, and then right before he meets this character, the point of view will come from their point of view. So when they actually intersect, the story comes from the second person's point of view. So this is Caius Crispin, and this one is coming into place, and we start seeing it from the point of view of Kaja. From here, I would not have pronounced it Kaja, but this is how the guy in the audiobook did. I didn't actually see how it was spelled until much later, so I'm going to continue to go with his pronunciation because he sounded fantastic. So I'm not going to argue with a man with a nice voice. From here, so Kaja coming to play, and she is a slave at this inn under this evil, kind of really sleazy, vicious guy named Morax, who's kind of like a Thénardier from, let's see, how do you spell it? Thénardier from Les Mis. He's the sleazy innkeeper from him. And so she's here, and she was sold into slavery because the same plague that killed Crispin's, wife and two daughters, basically starved her family, and so they had to sell her for a slave. And so she's kind of abused, beaten, and sexually taken wherever. She's literally, a slave. Anyone can do anything with her, and it's really, really this brutal life that she's living right now. And she comes into play, and she meets Caius Crispin. And what's different about this day is that everyone has been nice to her, or nicer. I should say nice. Nobody's actually nice to her, but it's nicer. She's not been sold to the, the brutal, members of the merchant class who are coming through or anything like that, who are just going to beat her up and use her from here. Even the other girls who bully her because she's a, quote unquote, savage barbarian from here. Even they are a little bit nicer to her. Even Morax is a little bit nicer to her. And so she finally starts connecting the pieces, and she realizes what's going on is that the Day of the Dead is arising, which is a big pagan day where the half world, where Leanon and these souls and all this crazy wild stuff is happening on the Day of the Dead. And because they're all pagans, everyone in this village is pagan, and Morax is kind of a leader. He's very rich, and then in this role, he plays an important role in the community. They demand a sacrifice to Ludon, the forest god in the Aldwood, where they will take and sacrifice a young maiden, a young girl, and sacrifice her to appease the gods for good harvest and all that other stuff. Typical pagans doing typical pagan stuff. And so she realizes that she's going to be sacrificed and murdered, and that's the reason why she's being left unmarked. So at this point now, she meets Caius Crispin, and she begs him to save her. And this is the part where we're kind of in an interesting challenge, because he doesn't owe to help her, and we don't even know if he can do anything. Because again, by trade, he's a mosaicist. You know, I don't actually know how to spell that, so pretend it goes mosaicist. He's a mosaicist. He's not exactly, you know, like, he can't fight his way out. And what it is, the other thing is, they're surrounded. The entire village believes in this. You know, you're understood that everyone else in the inn except for her, possibly, you know, the passing merchants are passing merchants, so they don't really count. They're not really of the community, but this is something the entire village is bought in, and everyone else seems to know it. So this is this really, really sort of creepy tension that's building here, as everyone is kind of, you know, kind of nicer to her, kind of mean to her, you know, because it doesn't matter. And there's this kind of this lingering chill that's coming into play as we realize that, you know, this noose is tightening around her. And Caius Crispin sees her, and she reminds him of his eldest daughter. And she asks him to help her, and he starts beginning to make this is where the decision starts to come into play. And this is an interesting thing where you can do, where you're having, you know, she's begging for help from Caius Crispin, Kaja, and then Lenon is saying the smart thing. And this is the interesting thing where you're playing. I kind of talked in another video when you're talking about the perfect, you know, argument from here. And what it is you can have the argument for both sides, where you can prove to the audience that these characters are smart and are thinking it through, and you can have them represent different sides. So you can set up an argument between these two where she says, leave her, you know, what are you going to do? You can't fight the whole village. You can't travel on the Day of the Dead. Like, you're going to just get yourself killed. This is suicide to help her. You can have this is the argument for, and he can make the argument against. And if he wins, then it kind of proves to the audience this is the right decision. This is it. And, you know, it's kind of building up this main character, and it also adds a drama. You know, an argument between the two characters helps build this tension as we're getting to the point, because you don't know if she's right or he's right. It adds to this tension. You know, you want to have push and pull on all sides at this point. So, you know, he's going to get pushback from anyone if he tries to save her, but then he's also getting pushback from Lenon. And at some point, if he can win her over and save her and do all this stuff, it's an even greater victory. You know, the idea is that the greater the antagonist, and if you overcome this antagonist, the greater the victory. You know, an antagonist, you know, nobody cheers you on if you stomp on ants. This is that same idea. And so Crispin starts beginning to make this decision kind of slowly in his head. And then he eventually and kind of finally begins to agree and start considering the idea of trying to help her out. And he's coming into this idea that Morax is just a complete sleaze. You know, he's staying at he runs an Imperial Inn, which means no one outside Imperial business can stay there. But it's completely full. So obviously Morax is doing some shady stuff, which is not the least, you know, it's probably the lesser evil, or lesser sin, as it were, that he's going to be doing, is this whole thing coming into play. And so what you have here, from here, is now we kind of are making this decision. We're kind of showing this because you have the stable masters in on this. You know, all of these people in the village are, and this creepy tension keeps building because they're all in on this. And then Caius Crispin starts trying to kind of figure out and make, you know, he starts throwing his weight. He's kind of testing the waters. He starts ordering the innkeeper around, bribing him, saying, you know, I'm a man. He puts on this real braggadocious aura and attitude around it, ordering, you know, the most expensive wine. This is one thing that Kay's always goes in about the expensive wine, you know, Tritando Blue from Tigana. And this is Cardadian or something like that. Really expensive wine. He orders the best room, and he bribes him. He says, give me the best room, and I want a bath, and you. And he picks Kaja to come give him a bath and scrub him, because she's a slave, and this is how it is done in that time. That's just kind of the norm at this point. And he gets to get a little bit more information. And then he asks Lenon at one point, you know, if she is the sacrifice, because she tells him they're going to kill me. He asks Lenon, because she seems to know things, you know, what's going to happen to her. And Lenon's like, you don't want to know. And he kind of pushes her to tell him, and basically she starts describing what it is they will take her. You know, all the men of the village will take her. They'll wear animal masks. They'll sexually take her. They will, there's some skin peeling, and then they will cut her heart out and leave it on an oak tree, hang her by her hair on an oak tree for Loudon to come take his sacrifice. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is absolutely sickening. This is where you start going, where you're like, okay, well, maybe we could help her. It's a bad situation, but, we could maybe. And then it's like, dear God, we've got to get her out of here, And this is absolutely critical. So now the audience is kind of switching to where, lean on, maybe you're correct, this is suicide, but we've got to try something. We're going to help her out because this is absolutely cruel. And this is where Caius Crispus starts beginning and working on this plan. And this is kind of still the question we have because we don't know what can he do. And so this is what we're trying to see. And this is the kind of almost like a really strange thriller sort of situation, kind of like almost like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood where he's going to that hippie village. This is like strange cult like area that's kind of building up. And so this is what is setting. So then this, of course, comes the question is what kind of plan? What is the plan that Crispin can come up with? And this is the thing that is so brilliant is because everything's laid out so articulately well and nobody cuts them any slack. Nobody's pulling their punches from here. Everybody's acting in accordance with their own wishes and their own will. And Morax is not going to give it up without a fight from here, and what's going on. So Crispin has to come up with a plan, and he begins to enact his plan. And this is an interesting part where Kay does this, where when the plan, he kind of starts to, Crispin engages the plan. He goes down to the common room. He starts drinking, really loudly. He starts openly, bragging, saying, I am from the emperor. I have a letter from the emperor. Nobody would do that. I have a letter from the chancellor ordering me to show up. And so basically what he's doing is he's saying, I am important. Don't mess with me. I'm important. You don't want to screw things up from here. He's doing all of this kind of bragging and everything and kind of getting this out there. And so this is kind of where the point of view shifts. This is an interesting thing that Kay does, is what it is if you've ever been in a moment, and it is possible, it is just me. I don't think so, but it is definitely possible where if you've ever done something, given a speech, did some sort of activity, gave a presentation, I gave a lot of presentations in school. And while you're up there in the presentation, you are sweating. You are absolutely dying. Your just face is turning, you're up there, you with no sleep, you got, bloodshot eyes, and you got big sweat drops that are kind of dripping everywhere because you're just like, oh gosh, get me out of here. And you're giving this presentation, and the words, English may not be your second language, but you're not sure it's your first, and everything is just this, and you're wishing you had prepared more, and all this, and you get through this, and you're like, dear goodness, thank you for that being over with. I know I did terrible. And then somebody will say, hey, that was great. And you're just like, how? The one question you have is just how? How did nobody see all this? Because what's going on is people are assuming, they're giving this, they're kind of going based off of, hey, you seemingly had it together. They're sitting there in the same way thinking, dear God, I'm glad I'm not up there because I could never do as good as that person. This is kind of this point of view where everyone is so much more critical of themselves because they can see all the working pieces. You can see all the working pieces in their mind. And this is something where you can't see the working pieces in someone else's mind. So you kind of assume, they have it together. And this is kind of the assumption that you run in when you tell it from a different point of view. Dumbledore is amazing and invincible, but when you start to see more of him and understand more of his point of view, he stops seeing so invincible from here. And so here we go. Let's set the scene. All right, so the scene we've got here is little Mr. Caius Crispin, our boy right here. He's kind of in the common room of the inn, and all around here there's a nice big fire, a bunch of drunk people around, and here's up the stairs, and this is his room from here. So he gets up here, and this is the point of view changes. It's no longer told from Crispin's point of view. It's another guy. It's this guy over here named Thelin, and this is the nephew of a rich and well-to-do merchant. His uncle and he is a rogue. He is a rogue of the roguish kind, and he is looking at Crispin saying, man, this guy is completely drunk. And this is what, again, this outside point of view really gives us, is it gives us, it's like an inside joke sort of deal. Everybody likes to be on the inside joke. Everybody likes to see what's going on. And so you were watching this guy get ready to make a fool of himself soon, because he sizes up Crispin and says, this is a sucker. I'm going to, this guy is completely an idiot. And he notices he doesn't have his purse on him, his giant sack of money. After all, he's bragging about how he's going to work for the emperor. He's got a letter from the chancellor. He must be loaded from here. And so what he does is Crispin's over here getting drunk and just sprouting out loudly. And again, we don't fully know what Crispin's up to, because we haven't seen him come into play at all. So we don't really know what's going into play. And so Thelen goes and it sneaks off and goes upstairs. And then when it turns out, this is what Crispin wanted all along. He took the bait from here. And so he waits, and Thelen goes up the stairs, sneaks, and Lenon is up here inside the room. And Lenon is able to talk to Crispin and tell him what's going on. And so Crispin's down here, and he's like, yada, 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 being drunk and everything like that. And he goes, you there, girl. And he happens to pick Kaja, I believe, and says, go get the letter. I want to show off my letter from the chancellor. And so she goes up there, and she's been ordered, if you go in my room and you see someone in here, here's what you have to do. And so we're sitting down there, Lenon says, he's here. He took the bait. Kaja gets up there and screams. And so what you realize is what you've got is this powder keg that Crispin is playing into. He's got the rich merchant over here. He's got Morax, who is illegally letting the merchants and a whole bunch of other people stay illegally. So he's definitely got something to hide from here. But Crispin's one guy, and he's completely outnumbered by all the villagers and everything. There's no way he can get Kaja out of here, because Morax is not going to sell his slave. He already knows this. He immediately knows this, because otherwise Morax has to find another sacrifice. He's not going to do it. She's been chosen. It's pagan. It's whatever. Foretold to be the case. This is what it has to be. And so she goes up there and screams. And the nephew, Thelen, instead of thinking clearly, he jumps out the window. And Lenon warms, and everybody's rushing around trying to figure out what's going on. And Caius runs around here and swacks him on the head. Basically dents his forehead, nearly killing him. He's so short now because he's been struck by such a mighty blow, because Crispin's a big dude. So he thunks him in the head and knocks him out. And now Crispin can turn the tables. And we kind of realize, because Lenon starts saying, hey, this plan actually might work. We get this, this change in the argument. We get this growing admiration for Crispin and this plan that we're seeing unfold, because we still don't know what's going to happen just yet from here. And so what Crispin does is he turns, and he turns to the rich uncle, the rich merchant, and Morax, and basically starts just laying it on. He's just like, how dare you? You're letting all these illegal people stay in this inn, and they try to steal from me with a letter from the chancellor working for the emperor. He's building it up. He's building up, like, how screwed are we? He's building up this tension, because what he's aiming for is a specific payoff. He's saying, how can you possibly repay this? What on earth are you going to do? I'm going to tell this, I'm going to tell that. And Lenon's warning him, don't go too far, because if Morax thinks you're going to ruin him, he might try and just kill you. And then the merchant says, the perfect thing. He says, how can I repay you? This was my nephew. And Crispin kind of gets that this guy is an honorable man. He's playing it correctly. My nephew, who's no good, from here, because Crispin's saying, I know what we do with thieves. We cut their hands off, this whole idea. And the uncle starts going into uncle drive. He's trying to smooth things over. He's like, I've got money. We can pay it. We can get my retarded, my absolutely stupid nephew. We can get him back, but we need to get him out of it. We need to smooth this situation up. We don't want to get Morax in trouble. We don't want to give this. And so he offers it. And so what Caius Crispus says is, because he can't make a play for the girl so openly. It's one of these weird situations where he can't want to save the girl, because if Morax and the rest of the villagers get they're not going to let her, they're just going to be like, no, we're just not going to sell her. We're just not going to sell her. We're just not going to do it. He knows that there's this way. And so the other thing he does is say, Morax, you need to give wine, the expensive wine, to all of these people. So now he's got this crowd of a lot of non-villagers. And this comes into play in a really big deal. He's got a lot of non-villagers who are starting to like him. So he's got 3 players. He's got Morax, the merchant, and the non-villagers, the other merchants and other people who are illegally staying there. He's saying, you know what? Let's smooth this all over. He goes, you, rich uncle, pay me what this is worth for this, the money I almost lost. Pay me the same amount. And the uncle says, done. And then he goes, Morax, you owe me. And what you're going to do is you're going to let this merchant buy the girl, whoever she is, who saved my money. You all owe her, because without her, I would have been robbed, and I would have come, and this place would have been destroyed. You would have been sacked. Your money, all your money that you've been illegally, would have confiscated. It would have ruined everything. You're going to let me do this. You're going to let him, you're going to sell it to him for a fair price. And so Morax is like, he's thinking like, crap, no, I can't do this. And then I'm going to have to find a new sacrifice. We're going to do this. He kind of hates Kaja. Everything's perfect. Everyone's been preparing. I don't know what exactly that means. Everyone's ready to just abuse and torture this girl as part of the ceremony. This is what they want. The bunch of crazy sick people. And this is what they want. This is what they're after. This is the evil that they've been planning, and this is what's going on. But this audience now is looking at Morax saying, actually, he forced Morax to give us a bunch of wine, so we like him. The merchant's like, sure. I just want to smooth things over and hopefully get my nephew out with not getting killed. And so Morax now is in this position where everyone's kind of looking for him, because it's like, after all, why do you care? And he's like, no. Morax still says, no, you can't have it. And Caius Crispin, really lays it on and says, good. You should lose something you care about. I understand you just like to bed her, but you should lose something you care about because of your incompetence from here. And this is just where he really is twisting it into play. This is an absolute brilliant plan, because it's the social pressure. He's got everyone here who's looking on Morax to do the right thing, and he's got this injured party who's saying, I will graciously. Basically what Crispin's saying is he's basically loading himself up as a crook. I will take a bribe in exchange for not turning you all in from here. It's this idea that if they knew he was doing all of this to save the girl, it wouldn't work. They have to think that he's just as big of a crook as he is, as everyone else is here, except for maybe the merchant, because the merchant guy is actually pretty honorable. So minus him. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. Otherwise, they wouldn't go along with it. And this is just how well this whole thing plays out. Lenon is even sitting here like, dear me, this plan might actually work. How does this go? And so what happens now is they go up to the room. Crispin's rescued Kaja. He now owns. He's got the paperwork drawn up. He's gotten a whole bunch of money. He has this sack of money times 2 now, because the uncle was like, yep, I really want to not try and get my nephew killed, even though I do kind of probably am going to beat him or outcast him or something, because he caused all of this problem. You have this. Lenon is showering on approval from here. And even Vargos, the guy who we kind of forgot about at this point, Vargos is looking on this, and he's trying to even decide, was all this intentional? Because you don't really know. Is Caius Crispin just, is he playing this crook role? We know he's not, because we know he's not a crook, because we can see from his point of view. But all these other characters, and you have this admiration that's overflowing for this main character of ours, and now we're completely pulled in. We want to see what he's going to do for the rest of the story. And this is what really helped pull me into this story and just kind of made it such an easy decision to keep going. Because it's a duology. He's got to pull me, Guy Gavriel Kay has got to pull me through 2 books. And with this scene, which again, it is later in, so this is not like a hook scene in the beginning that's going to like pull you into the story. But this is something, it's such a good scene. And now I'm ready to see whatever Crispin does. Like if he came out with another book with more stuff about Crispin, I would read it instantly. Just because I love this character so much, because he's so smart. And this is what, street smarts, all of this is coming into play. And this is his brilliant plan that's come into fact. And this is what's going on. And this is what you want in a story. You want the audience to want to see what happens next. And that's what he's really accomplished with this, and he's done such a phenomenal job with this from here. So, yeah, that kind of covers everything from here. Let me know if you guys enjoy this, kind of want to see more of them. I'm probably going to listen or read to more of Kay's books, just because I'm absolutely adored all of this so far. And one thing, I was actually watching another YouTuber. This guy's name is The Library Ladder, who has an amazingly deep voice all the way down on here in the floor, down in the basement. Such a deep voice. And he was talking about this tier list of Kay, and I really enjoyed it. I think you guys should check that out if you're looking kind of which books of his to read and which to get into, because it's a great video, and it helped me decide which book I'm going to read next. I think I'm going to do A Song for Arbonne, possibly. I think, or Aubernay, I'm butchering that, but I think that's the one I'm going to do that, or The Lions of Al Rassan. I think I'm going to do that one possibly next too. One or the other, one either from there. So I hope you guys enjoy this one, and I'll see you in the next.